Hello, PewterCast listeners. Today is Sunday, July 29th, and welcome to episode 2 of Training Camp Diaries with Ren. Day 2 of training camp is in the books, and we had a lot to talk about. We had everything from big plays to rain, so let's get into it. I've decided to break down the show, give it a little more structure. Every episode I'll be doing like first out players, things I see early, then like an early drill section, then there's a walkthrough section that's probably going to be short, sort of after they do some of their individual drills or position drills. They go into do these walkthroughs, and then I'm going to do 7-on-7, the 11-on-11, and then anything else I saw or heard through social media, or if I get to the after practice interviews, anything in there I found interesting, and so that's just how we're going to roll from now on. So first out, that's our first section. Once again today, Ryan Fitzpatrick was the first out there. He was over by the season ticket holders section, which is over by the press tent, where they do the Buccaneers live show, and 620 was out there. That's a local sports talk show radio station. If you're interested, you can listen to it anywhere in the United States, because they go through the iHeart app. You can put it on your phone, so download the iHeart app and just type in 620 the sports animal, and you can listen live. It's really only about a minute delay, maybe a minute and a half, but they're going to be at training camp a lot. So if you're at work or buzzing around the house or doing, you go ahead and you can listen to 620. But yeah, Fitzpatrick was out there today. He was the first one, tossing the ball around with some kids. I don't know if they were his or he picked him out of the crowd over there by the season ticket holder section. But I guess really you could say the first person out was Alan Cross. As like last year, I remember this happening. The tight ends sort of got to work early. The new tight end coach, Steele, has sort of kept tradition going where, practice officially starts at 8:45, but 8:20, 8:30, the tight ends are out there and they're already going through some positioning drills, running short routes and out routes and trying to do some toe touches near the sidelines. And Alan Cross out there probably, a good 5 minutes before any of the other tight ends. So the tight end group came out and they started going through their drills 2 days in a row now. Gerald McCoy has come out. He comes out, by himself, and he does some stretches, and then he does like a light jog, and when he comes close towards the stands, everyone gives him a shout, and at least for the past 2 days, he's acknowledged him, just kind of raised his hand a little bit. He was wearing his Wolverine cleats. He got some publicity yesterday about he was wearing some Hulk cleats, and a local artist who was born in St. Pete but moved to Tampa in his 20s. I'm going to say airbrush. I don't know if it's true. I believe his name is Jason Hulfish, and he airbrushed some cleats, so he's got a pair of Hulk cleats, and today he wore some Wolverine cleats. On Gerald's social media account, he actually tweeted out a picture of 4 sets. So if he goes by what they were in the picture, tomorrow should be Batman cleats, where one is a Batman and the other one is a Joker. So one's airbrushed like the Joker, and which I thought was an interesting. I don't know if he had any input into it, but he's using sort of the old school Batman, the blue cape and cowl. That's what he'll be wearing if he stays in progression tomorrow. And then the 4th pair was in the back, and it was behind the other 3 pairs. A little hard to see, but I think I sort of got a little bit of a skull and maybe some flames. I wasn't sure if it was the Flash or it might be Ghost Rider. So, stay tuned for that breaking news. That'll be what you need to be tuning into for Monday to see what he's doing. I'm probably going to have to ask that question and tweet out to somebody who's like one of the beat writers who's a little closer, can actually get a look at it to see what he's wearing. But so today Gerald's wearing his Wolverine shoes, and that was pretty much it for the first players out. Then they got into their drills, and I noticed that one time they were moving from station to station, Jameis had to stay behind, and one of the coaches, or maybe it was the trainer, had to get down and it was readjusting his leg brace. And I didn't remember having him one on, or having him wearing one yesterday for day one. And so I was a little concerned, and I tweeted it out, but I've sort of figured out the way the Bucs work in these past recent years. If it was anything injury-wise, we probably would have heard about it in the morning. So Dirk Cutter said it at his after-practice press conference. It's just for safety. It's his back plant leg. Just for stability. It's supposed to be the newest greatest and latest technology as far as leg braces go, and so I saw a lot on social media after I got home after practice that a lot of people were talking about his leg brace. But just go watch a Dirk Cutter interview. It's not due to an injury. It's just that more for stability and safety first type of deal. Also. Sweezy, J.R. Sweezy, there's a lot of hope riding on him this year as far as if he can nail down and stay healthy the right guard spot. But he seemed that he sort of had a phantom step. They were doing these drills where the tight end was lining up on the outside shoulder, and they'd both fire out and get their hands on the defensive end, and then one would break off and pick up the linebacker, sort of like working together to get to the second level. And I saw Sweezy fire out once, and the coach stopped him and sort of motioning that he was doing a wasted step, as in instead of firing straight out, he was kicking his leg back to get leverage and then moving. And he showed it to him, and then they did it again. And he stopped it again and was doing the same motion with Sweezy. So they're coaching him up on that. I don't think it's really too much to worry about. And the main reason why, it's because how George Warhop likes to cross-trains the guys. In that particular set, the tight end was on. First off, the tight end's never going to be on either one of Sweezy's outside shoulders. It's going to be, there's going to be a tackle. The right tackle is going to be there. And secondly, during this drill, the tight end was actually on his left shoulder, which would have made him the left tackle in that drill, which of course is something, I don't know if they cross-train in Seattle, but it's something he's definitely never played in an NFL game. If people don't know, or maybe you've forgotten, that Sweezy was I believe he was a defensive tackle. Might have been defensive end, but in college, that's where he played, and then when Seattle drafted him, they turned him into a guard. So his even the reps that he's probably done in practice as a tackle are minimal at best. So, but it was interesting to see that to coach him up, and something that was that minute. You kind of hear that all the time, especially with veteran players, when you start to pick up the little things, the nuances, the finer points of your position, finer points of blocking, finer points of running routes, finer points of ball placement, and that sort of thing. That Warhop was on him, and that was one of the finer points, is like you're wasting a step. Moving on, Chris Baker was being Chris Baker. He got his Twitter handle. It fits him, swaggy. He was quite the dancer out there during stretches. It was just good to see him out there. He didn't make it to a lot of OTAs. I think he made it to one OTA, and of course he was there for minicamp. But all the players have shown up. But Baker's sort of, as there's been a lot of talk about Deshaun Jackson and the rookies, and Godwin and Evans and of course O.J. Howard. But all through this mix, because of lack of, I guess, visibility during OTAs, Chris Baker's sort of been lost in this whole discussion about what do you think this person's going to bring, what do you think that person's going to bring. But he was there, and he was having a good time, and he was dancing around. During the stretch portion of practice, which is sort of before the drills, unless some guys are working on their own, or like I said, the tight ends sort of start early. I noticed that George Johnson was sort of not going with the rest of the team. They have this like little brief routine they do, and it's nothing exerting whatsoever. It's like take like a lunge step, and they lunge step for 10 yards and turn around and put their hand in the air and bend all the way down and touch the ground, stuff like that. They do that for like 3 or 4 minutes or something. But George Johnson, who was a defensive end we traded for Detroit with a couple of years ago, broke his hip last year during preseason, and he was spending a lot of time. They have these resistant bands that sort of you slide over your shoes, and you can put them like at your ankles or your knees or your thighs, and he had them all the way up like high up on his thighs, and he was doing sort of his own stretching routine, really trying to get that strengthen. What I was thinking is he was trying to strengthen that hip up, really paying special attention to that injury that kept him all out of last year. Remember when I told you yesterday the first drill was a scramble drill? Today it was like a release drill, I guess, and they did sort of inside out. So they put all the receivers, all the tight ends, and all the backs sort of in two lines, half on one side of the field, half on the other. So they had two quarterbacks. I believe it was Winston and it was Winston and Griffin, on one side, and then on the other side they had Fitzpatrick and still calling him Blue Cow. I'm just gonna go with it. Sifo Lofau, I believe it is. Sifo Lofau. Lofau rhymes with Blue Cow, right? Maybe is it Lufau? It's got to be Lufau. Yeah. If it's Blue Cow, it's Lufau. Yeah, so I'm calling it. It's Lufau. I got it. So it was Fitzpatrick and Lufau were the other pair, and basically they had a coach with, you've seen him, with the pads that go all the way up to his elbow, and your kind of whole arm goes inside the pad, and the receiver, running back / tight end would break and slap the pads away, to get free off the line, and everyone did sort of an outside break, and then after that they would break and sort of break to the inside. So the right side and the left side of the coach was there with the with the big puffy arms, and so that that was like the first drill of the day, and it's right in front of the fans. There's lots of oohs and ahs, very simple stuff, but this is the first football people have seen since January. So when Sean Jackson would come up, people would sort of sit up a little straighter in the bleachers. Same thing with Mike Evans, Godwin as well. Nothing really big there. I just kind of wanted to point out the difference that what the first drill is. They definitely have a game plan at what they're doing. Practice moves real fast. Like everything's quick. Everyone's running to the new drill, getting to their new stations. But this is interesting. Excuse me. Remember when it was first sort of talked about how O.J. Howard, might become a Buccaneer, and people dismissed it right away, as I did. I had to think about it for an hour or two, and I go, well, that's not really a bad idea. But people dismissed it because we had Cam Brate, and then everyone sort of remembered that Dirk Cutter sort of runs this X tight end and Y tight end type of offense, where the Y tight end is really sort of a fullback. He sort of lines up in the H-back or maybe you could say flanker back position, and that was mainly sort of Luke Stocker, Brandon Myers, and Alan Cross. But when the Y tight ends broke off, they sort of went over to field 2 to hit the sleds to work on some of their blocking. O.J. Howard didn't go. He stayed with the X tight ends, I guess you could say. So Luke Stocker went over there, Alan Cross went over there, and then the two fullbacks that are actual fullbacks, Quavon Hicks, who's not listed as a fullback on the roster, but there's a few things on the roster on Buccaneers.com that are incorrect, such as like they have Chris Baker as a defensive end instead of a defensive tackle, and so they have Quavon Hicks listed as a running back when really he's a fullback, and Austin Johnson. So Stocker, Cross, Johnson, and Quavon Hicks were all over there at the sleds, which wasn't surprising. But you've heard once they drafted O.J. Howard was, there's not that I'm paraphrasing, but Dirk Cutter, you've heard him say it a few times. If you follow super close, there's not that many wide tight ends that come out of college, and the wide tight end is that slash fullback tight end hybrid sort of player that Dirk Cutter uses in offense. But when the white tight ends went over to go work on their blocking, O.J. Howard stayed sort of with the X's. Once again, what that means, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. I'm just passing it along to you. Sticking with the drill topic, Chris Godwin impressed again. This kid's body control is unbelievable. You get this ball, you get a ball, and this kid's zip code, and he's going to catch it. He had 3 plays today where he twists, and this is besides the drills. Like, he did it once in drills, and he did it once in 7-on-7s, and he did it again on 11s. He just catches the ball, and it just, like I said, just get it near him. Just put it in his zip code, and he's going to come down with it. He's probably... does he have the best body control? As from what I've seen in 2 practices, he has the best body control of wide receiver. I would put it above probably any of the undrafted free agent rookies. I would put it above Humphreys, and I would put it above Evans, because I've seen those guys for a couple years. Everything, just Deshaun Jackson's so smooth. He really doesn't have to, like I said yesterday, he kind of moves at a different frequency. He's just watching him move. You just know he's quicker than everybody else out there on the field. So you don't really. He never really has to twist or turn or manipulate his body so much, because he can either accelerate or decelerate so quickly that he doesn't have. If the ball's out in front of him, he can turn that burst on, and then he just kind of reaches out and get it instead of have to dive for it. Or a ball behind him, he can, decelerate quick enough where it's just sort of a back shoulder catch, instead of where he he has to twist his whole torso around and make a catch over like his back shoulder. So, not really sure what I'm saying about Chris Godwin, except that he's just impressive and his body control is excellent. And he's turning out, once in, it's very early. I mean, pads aren't even on. He seems to be, he's going to be a steal for the Buccaneers if they got him in the third. And during the drills, kind of staying with the tight end theme that I started with earlier, Westbrook had a few drops. So you got Alan Cross. I think they're going to keep 4 tight ends. Obviously, they're keeping Cameron Brate. Obviously, they're keeping O.J. Howard. To me, it's up in the air on Luke Stocker, simply because he can't get any separation. He's so one-dimensional as that Y tight end. He can just block. Then you have Anthony Auclair, who everyone's high on, the undrafted free agent out of Canada. Alan Cross, who I talked a little bit about earlier. And then Tevin Westbrook, who spent 2 years on the practice squad. He's someone else who switched positions from college. He started out at college as a defensive end, and his later years at the University of Florida, he switched to tight end, and the Bucs have kept him safely stashed on the practice squad for the past 2 years. Big athletic kid, as you would think. Someone that was a tight end can actually switch positions or was a defensive end and switch positions to be a tight end. But during the drills, he, if you were just judging off today, you would probably have to put him into the ones that not make the cut. Now, having said that, if you remember yesterday, I was talking about how they've made the rotation with the quarterbacks and wide receiver, where Jameis Winston's always throwing to Cam Brate, and then when his turn comes up, O.J. Howard's up again. So he's always throwing to Cam Brate, and he's always throwing to O.J. Howard. Tevin Westbrook doesn't really have that luxury of having Jameis throwing to him. I didn't really look to see who. The balls weren't perfect. They weren't hitting him in the chest. He was dropping him. He had to stretch for him, but it'd be one of those things. If you saw it in a game, the color announcer would definitely, if they showed the replay, would say, that was a catch you have to make. especially with like something like third down. If you would have caught it, it would have been a first down. That would definitely be the reply that you would hear on TV. Nothing terrible, like I said. It's not like it was a 2 yard out and the ball hit him in the chest, but they were definitely catchable balls. And I just sort of noticed that when I'd look up and look over there, it just seemed like back-to-back times that I saw Westbrook have some shoot through his hands. So just mention it for you. And then they have the walkthroughs. The walkthroughs is after they do their drills, they sort of come together, and the offense comes to the main field, but everyone takes off their helmet, and this is sort of like where they're doing their installs. The offense is running plays, but everyone's like walking, jogging speed on it. What I found funny is you're looking at the defense they're going up against. Lofau is playing like will linebacker. Tevin Westbrook's playing like slot corner. Spurbeck, I think I got that right. The undrafted free agent wide receiver out of Boise State, like he's playing one safety. So it's the way they counter this. So the quarterback can read who's who. They have to wear little basically stockings on their head. So if you're the Mike linebacker, you wear like a green stocking. There's 3 of them, and the linebackers wear one. One's wearing white if he's in for that play. Would be the Sam. Yellow would be the Will, and green would be the Mike linebacker. It's if you go to practice when you start to see this start to happen, and if you're thirsty or you forgot something in the car or you just kind of want to stretch your legs, this would be the time to go, because it lasts about 15-20 minutes, and it's sort of the time when everyone starts to stretch their legs and shift around in their seat, sort of intermission at the movies, if you will. But this is where I first noticed that Gerald McCoy is the only one with fancy dancy cleats. Vernon Hargraves was wearing all gold today. I didn't see what he wore yesterday, but you can see him from the stands. His are just sort of solid gold. Like, I don't know if he was wearing Nikes, Reeboks, Adidas, whatever, but even the logo, if it was a Nike, like even the Nike swoosh was gold. I mean, they're all solid gold. And the only player that I saw that also had some sort of flair on their cleats was his running mate, if you let me get away with that, Brent Grimes. They're, for lack of a better description, they're McDonald's shoes. They're McDonald's colors. On the outside, they're that McDonald's red, and then on the inside, they're super bright McDonald's yellow. Actually, pretty cool looking from a distance, but so. Those are some of the things I saw in walkthroughs, and this was also the time I tweeted this out when they sort of asked the fans to squish together. It was a little cooler out there today, and there was a little bit of a breeze, not much, but it was definitely a more comfortable day, and the sun would sort of hide behind the clouds for 2 or 3 minutes and come back out and things like that. So they sort of came out and asked the fans to squish together because they were trying to get more people in. Like they just had people, back where sort of the concessions and the pirate boat playing music and things like that back in that area. They were trying to get in to watch practice, and nobody did it. It was like, yeah, sure, we'll move, and no one would move because there's nothing that you don't want to. I mean, these excuse me, these bleachers are sort of built for small people, and a lot of the fans at Buck practice are not slight people, and it's warm, and the last thing you really want to do is be shoulder to shoulder on each side with somebody. Especially, somebody who came late. So I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but I wasn't the only one who moved. So what the Bucs did, if you remember yesterday, I was talking about how they had that L design, and the leg of the L, the bottom part of the L, is now gone for his bleachers. There used to be bleacher seating there for last year's training camp, but it's gone because of they're building the indoor facility. they sort of let people walk. They just let them feed behind the end zone where those bleachers used to be, and there was probably, I would say, 300 people, probably closer to 300 than 200 people that, they had no shade, standing out there in the sun, no chairs to sit in, and but they sat there and they watched practice from there, and it looked like they were happy to do it. So a lot more people showed up today. Of course, it's a weekend. It's Saturday than they did on Friday, and the buzz is very high on this team, and everybody wants to get a look at them while they can. There was a sort of a family next to me, and they didn't speak a word of English, and their accent, you could tell they were. I don't really know how to say this, but when you meet somebody who lives in America and speaks Spanish, their accent seems to be a little different than someone actually from Spain, if that makes any sense. You could sort of tell that they were European. Also, by the way, they dressed a little bit, but so here's this, and they had some Bucs gear on, so they didn't speak a lick of English, but. They're looking at their roster card. The Buccaneers hand out this roster card with all the numbers on it, so you can, since 90 guys are out there, you can sort of find the lesser-known players, or, maybe you're a fan of Claude Alexander, but you don't really know what number he is. You can find Quan's name and find his number and follow him around on the field, if you will. So lots of fan interest, which was really prevalent today. I also tweeted out a picture when I got there. I got there at 7:34, and there was already probably 100 people in line. And by the time the gates opened, right around a half hour later, I'd say it was pushing 1,000. So like I said, lots of interest from the fans. Then that brings us to the 7-on-7s. O.J. Howard had one of the best catches. If you follow sort of the Bucs beat writers on Twitter, I think Riley Element was the one who sort of got that one. When I saw it, I was upset that I missed it. I saw some other beat writers tweet out that they were upset that they missed it, getting the video, that is. Riley Element got it, so if you want to see it, it was sort of like a down and in crossing, or a down and slant in, if you will, and it was O.J. Howard, and Wilcox, who had a very good day at safety, by the way, jumped the route and sort of cut in front of him, and they both reached out for the ball at the same time, and it spun up into the air, and it's off its axis, and O.J. Howard sort of rolled all the way off, so did a 360, but sort of did it off the back of Wilcox, and then reached out one hand as the ball, as he's rolling, the ball's hit its apex and it's on its way down, and he comes out of his spin and the ball's sort of, chest high, and he reaches out and grabs it, and had to sort of do a dive for it. So, that was the first really big eruption from the crowd today with this O.J. Howard circus catch. So if you at Junior Almanac on Twitter, take a peek at it. His video's up there. I'm sure, now that I think about it, I'm sure it'll be on Buccaneers.com probably sooner and later. 7-on-7s, pretty much it stayed the same as the question positions about who's starting with what. Javian Elliott, which was a surprise to me yesterday. I thought Judah Ajabarima would be the starting nickel, but Javian Elliott was the starting slot corner or nickel corner. And there really wasn't that much sharing today, to be honest. Once again, Devontae Bond. He was the starting Sam linebacker. And yesterday, Ryan Fitzpatrick sort of ran with the twos, and Ryan Griffin, ran mostly with the threes. But today they flip-flopped it. So Ryan Griffin ran with the twos mostly, and Ryan Fitzpatrick ran with the threes mostly, which also feeds into sort of that theory I threw out there yesterday that this quarterback battle is it hasn't been handed to Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he's going to have to earn it. So, as the days click by, it's not going to be sort of, every single day type of story that comes out. Like, who's winning the backup quarterback position. Some people could care less, but as the days click by, it's going to get straightened out, and it's as big as a battle as there is out there. This one will please my my co-host for the Petercast, Brent Allen. Brent was really down on Brent Grimes last year because he kept slipping. He would slip, and it tended to always be a big play. I think a couple times it might have even been a touchdown where Brent was trying to make a cut to stay as receiver and slip and fall down. And by the end of the year, all that went away because the defense started to play better the second half of the year, and Grimes, really did have a Pro Bowl type season, maybe even All Pro type season at corner. But Mike Evans was sort of driving him off the ball and did like a dig, a hard comebacker, and Winston hit him, and Brent was trying to stay with him, and he slipped, and I just had to throw that in there because it happened like right in front of me, less than 15 yards away, and I just saw Brent Grimes slip down, and it just kind of made me laugh. I'm like, I have to put this in the podcast for Brent, because I had totally forgotten all about how Brent Grimes slipped last year, and I had also forgotten about how much Brent Allen, my co-host and creator of the Petercast, used to get so mad at Brent Grimes about it last year. So it just brought a smile to my face. Here's something that we haven't talked about yet. During the 7-on-7s, at one point, I didn't really see what happened, but Levante David went out for a play. I don't know, like maybe he blew a tire in his shoe, or maybe his one of his buckles on his chin strap broke. But the first guy off the bench that was backing up Levante David was Cameron Lynch. Came as a little bit of a surprise to me, but somebody's got to do it. Luckily, last year, that's why they only carried 5 linebackers last year, because they had Darryl Smith who could play all three of those spots. If Quan or Levante went down last year, Darryl Smith was going to take whichever spot they went down, and then someone would replace him at Sam. So it really saved a roster spot for them last year with the experience and NFL, veteran knowledge that Darryl Smith brought to the linebacking core last year. But to get back to what I was saying, so Cameron Lynch was, so as of now, it looks like to me that Cameron Lynch will be backing up Levante David, like I said, as of today. Just a few more little things. Cody Riggs and Alex Gary, those guys were the third safeties. Same as yesterday. That was today as far as the pecking order. Tandy and Conte were running with the first teams, and Conte had a really good day. People, you kind of forget about it because he had it sort of early in the 7-on-7s. Then they had the 11-on-11s, and he didn't really he didn't have any splash plays in the 11-on-11s. That was sort of like the more hype. The sun had gone down, the crowd was getting into it, and there was lots of big plays. Almost like it seemed like every snap there was another big play offensively or defensively. So you really have to go back, and I had to go back over my notes because I had totally forgotten about how Chris Conte good he looked early. He never got burnt either. He just didn't have any of those splash plays during the 11-on-11s, but he did look real sharp in the 7-on-7s. And then another tight end, I talked about Westbrook. Eau Claire had 2 drops in a row. They ran this, an out play to him, and it kind of goes through his hands, and they sort of ran it again, but basically just flipped the play, and he just ran the same route, on the other side, and then he dropped it. Once again, when I talk about, anytime I talk about something that happened that was a little negative, it's nothing that's, their positions on the depth chart, and if you ask Dirk Cutter, he's going to say you don't have a depth chart now, and he hates depth charts, and they think they're stupid, but the only reason he does them is because he has to put them out for games. But, so let's say making the 53-man or not making the 53-man. It doesn't sort of vary day to day. They don't rank, all right, these are the 50, we rank our players 1 through 90, and then they have practice, and the coaches watch the film, they re-rank them. They don't do that. So if you have sort of like an off day or you have a spectacular day, what they're really looking for is consistency either way. Of course, they like consistency as having a better day, so they sort of know what kind of player you are. But if you consistently sort of have, a substandard day, that's obviously the best way to get kicked off the team. But I just wanted to throw that out there because Auclair seems to be everyone's favorite. If any of the undrafted free agents that are in camp this year are going to make the team, it seems that his name comes up the most. And like I said earlier, that tight end room is going to be a tough cut. So that brings us to 11 on 11s, and this was entertaining to watch. Like I mentioned earlier, it was big play after big play after big play. Deshaun Jackson had a couple bombs. One, he just burnt Vernon badly. I wasn't really watching Deshaun Jackson because the way they lined up, at least on that play, Deshaun Jackson on the far end, and you're almost at field level, so you don't really have, it's hard to see the other who's on the other sideline because the stands are so low to the ground. But when Jameis released it, I heard one guy over to my right go, "He's gone," and you quickly follow the ball trajectory, and I look over, and Deshaun Jackson's got like 8 yards on Vernon, and how we've all talked about that, I guess at least have wondered, can Jameis Winston overthrow Deshaun Jackson? And at least for this play, the answer was no. He had to slow up for it. He probably would have got tackled as soon as he caught it, but Vernon wasn't really going full speed once he was beat. And then, but Tandy came over full speed to try to cut him off, and it was basically just an open field between him and Deshaun made one move and a burst, and as soon as he made that burst, Tandy shut it down right away. And then a second one, same side of the field, and it was on Vernon again, but and this one was during the rain. But the pass was originally broken up, but instead of like falling to the ground, it sort of popped up in the air, and Vernon got his hand in there. But Jackson stayed with it and pulled it in, and he would have been tackled immediately there. But it was another big gain, and that made obviously the fans happy. That's where we got him, especially after yesterday. And it's just because of the install plays they were doing, I'm sure. But yesterday, Jackson was doing like some screens and slants and short hitches was pretty much all that he ran, or at least that was all was really thrown to him day one. But day two, they aired it out. So he was my biggest star. I was going to do biggest stars for the 11 on 11s. And then before he got burnt twice, Vernon was having a great day. He had 2 or 3 times where he either flat out knocked the ball down or got his hand in there right when the receiver was catching it. And there was even one time, where the guy got it, but the coverage was really tight, and he stripped it from him. So he had, at least by my count, 2, depending on how you grade the other one, 3 pass defenses, and in just sort of like a little 15-minute period. And then I mentioned him earlier, J.J. Wilcox. He had a great breakup on a seam route to O.J. It was a small window, but he was there with O.J. Howard step for step, got his hand in there, broke it up, got some lots of, I don't want to say accolades, but everyone came up and was real excited for him on that. And then there was a ball that sort of, I think it shot through Camp Rates. No, it was Freddie Martino. Freddie Martino had one go off his hands and deflect up the air, and Wilcox was there, sort of right place, right time. But so he got a pick and returned it straight up the field. It wouldn't have been a pick six, but nonetheless, if the ball's in the air, you got to get to it. And so, yeah, he looked good. So those would be my 3 stars for 11 on 11. Deshaun Jackson and Vincent Hargraves, oddly enough, since they were pretty much going up against each other. And this is something where, you start to see with the talent now at wide receiver where it's really a problem. Because if Deshaun Jackson was on our team, like Brent Grimes would be covering him. But now that you have somebody like Mike Evans, you know, Brent Grimes has to cover him, and that leaves Deshaun Jackson on the second best corner on your team, and that's dangerous. So it sort of worked out for both guys. Obviously, if as a fan and looking at it right away, you would think that Vernon had a bad day because he gave up 2 long balls, but he didn't. He actually had a really good day. And just want to throw Chris Conte in there again, just to remind everybody that on the 7-on-7s he looked good, and he looked good early. Interesting note that after practice was over, Alan Cross and Anthony Auclair sort of went to the middle of the field with Ryan Griffin, and they put in some extra work on routes and stuff. And then right behind them, Jameis came over with Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard, and they were doing the same things. By then, it's sort of funny. It's like the horn, the final. They always blow a horn when it's time to sort of like go from stretches to go to your first drills to go to your walk. And then the horn blows, and they go to the walkthrough, and then the horn blows, and they go to the 7-on-7s. But the final blow, because everyone sort of knows that after 11-on-11s and the horn blows, that's the end of practice. And then of course you get the cue where they all sort of run in the middle of the field and huddle up and the coaches or Coach Cutter. I'm not really sure. I've never really been in one of those or seen any video of it. Gives a little quick speech, and they break for the day. But as soon as that final horn blows, the fans rush the mesh fence. It's they're to keep sort of the fans at bay, or there's 2 mesh fences. There's one that's sort of 5 yards off the sidelines, and then it's only like a 2-foot, 3-foot gap, and there's another mesh fence, and then that makes a little alleyway, and that's where all the beat reporters like Greg Auman and Travis Sikkema, those guys are taking their videos there. I saw actually saw Mark Cook in the stands today, but I saw Scott Reynolds from P Report down there for most of the day. Lots of Hard Knocks people, going back and forth. Some Bucs photographers going back and forth in that little alleyway. But as soon as that horn blows, man, everybody just kind of stood up and rushed that fence. Where really the easiest way to get out, if you're not trying to get an autograph and wait, is sort of just walk down the bleachers. Like, go to the top of the bleachers and walk all the way down to the end, and then get out that way, because it's packed like Bourbon Street on Mardi Gras. It's a chore to get through. Not that I'm complaining. I'm just trying to paint a picture for you. Before I get to the pressers, this is something that I hadn't heard before, and it was pretty much understood that the opposite was true. I was watching Greg Auman's live Facebook feed of sort of wrapping up the practice. He's been doing one at 8 in the morning. They're very short. They're like 5 minutes. He's been doing one before practice, and then after practice, 8 in the morning, and then one at noon. And during his wrap-up, he talked about how Ryan Griffin actually is practice eligible. He's got 4 years in the league, 2 are on the practice squad, and 2 on the 53-man roster. And I know they changed the rules a bit last year, but the way I understood them was that if you have 2 years accrued on a 53-man roster, that that's the end of it. That's where after you hit that mark, that's where your practice squad eligibility ends. But apparently not. I should look. I'm going to look it up and see exactly how he sort of fits in that window. But he does. So that's another thing to come into play, because obviously Ryan Fitzpatrick has 0 practice squad eligibility left, and then you got to sort of start weighing, if the Buccaneers put Ryan Griffin, release him and try to re-sign him to the practice squad, will they even be able to get that far? And if they have him on the practice squad, how soon is it going to be, if at all, that some team comes and just plucks them away and puts them on their roster looking for an experienced backup quarterback? I mean Ryan Griffin, you've never seen him play, but he's like Greg Auman said during the video, he's 27 years old, so he has 4 years of NFL experience, and under 2 really good offensive-minded coaches, because his first two were at New Orleans under Sean Payton, and now he's had two under Dirk Cutter. So he might be valuable. So that's something that Jason Light and his staff have to weigh out. But it is an option that I didn't think existed, or I didn't know existed until about an hour or two ago, when Greg Roman said that on his Facebook Live feed. And then finally, the press conferences. They were pretty standard. Lavonte David had one, and Dirk Cutter had one. He sort of picked out the same guys I had talked about, like, hey, coach, who looks good? And he talked about Deshaun Jackson. He talked about Vernon Hargreaves. He also brought up J.J. Wilcox. And when he brought up J.J. Wilcox, he also talked about Mike Evans, Justin Evans, the safety, second-round pick safety. And talked a little bit about Evans. Not that he had a good day. It was just that, it was good to see both those guys out there, because they missed, most, if not all, OTAs with injuries. And I thought it was interesting how he said, Justin Evans just needs to be more consistent tackler. And they haven't been in pads yet, so he's basing that off just college tape. So they knew. What that tells me, the Buccaneers knew Jason Light and Dirk Cutter knew what they were getting into when they were drafting him in the second round. And I've been on record before as saying that it was they got sort of like pigeonholed into that. They wanted a safety, they were going to draft a safety, but by the time their pick came up in the second round, like 6 safeties had already been taken, had already been pulled off the board. So we're definitely in the first round, best player available. It fell perfectly to them, and you had to take O.J. Howard. That was the case in the first round, where you could really go best player available. Of all the 7 draft picks, or 6 draft picks, I'm sorry, I think that one, the safety one, was sort of more of like, we need to pull the trigger now, because who knows who's going to be left, and when our third round pick comes up, we might have to, sacrifice future or later round picks to get up to where we want to, if Justin Evans, and if they had other guys after him that they felt comfortable with drafting at safety, were coming off the board. So like I said, I found that a little eyebrow raising that Dirk Cutter said he needs to be a better consistent tackler when he hasn't seen him tackle one time, live, basically. It's all been off tape. And there was there's conflicting reports about if the Bucs are going to be in pads tomorrow. They're not going to be in full pads. Cutter sort of cleared this up during his press conference. But they do put on shoulder pads. They've just been in shorts and shells the first 2 days. And he said the CBA rule is shorts and shells first 2 days, third day shoulder pads, and then after that it's full pads. So there'll probably be more contact tomorrow than there was, obviously, the first 2 days. Because some of those players out there actually, they wear their practice pants. Most of the players just kind of like in shorts. Lots of guys that wear leggings, but they got shorts over them. But there's a few players like Noah Spence, Dante Dye Jr. They're wearing practice pants. I think I even saw one running back had his thigh pads in. So to each their own. So tomorrow it's going to look a lot more like an actual football practice, especially the offensive defensive line. Now they got their helmets and their pads on. There's not a lot of action that takes place with their legs. They're not tackling anybody. They're not diving around. So it might be sort of almost full go offensive line versus defensive line tomorrow, which would be really fun to watch. And Lavonte David had a press conference. And not much from that. He asked a lot of questions about the defense, and it was pretty much just, standard answers. We feel we can have one of the best dominant defenses, and those type of things. But something that I did take out of it that I liked, he said, is that the defense wants to over-communicate before the snap. Now, we all remember that was sort of the problem the beginning half of the year, and especially those back-to-back weeks where they got blown out by Oakland, or didn't get blown out by Oakland, but Oakland pretty much marched up and down the field against them, broke the league, the all-time league record for penalties in a game, and still won the game. and still put up a lot of points. It seemed like 1st and 20 was no problem for them, and then the next week, Atlanta came into town and just put a whooping on the defense and the team, and just went up and down the field just like the Raiders did. And then we had that little mini bye week, and the story is that they really worked on their communication, and so it was just good to hear a little affirmation coming from Levante David that that's something they're working on and something that they want to do. That not only did he just say communicate before the snap of the ball or up to the point of the snap of the ball, he said that he wants to over communicate. So what that says to me is that Mike Smith's message is getting through, at least to his starters, that getting everybody on the same page before the snap of the ball is really important. But it seems like they've bought in, and things are going to be good. I fully expect the defense to be a lot closer to what we saw the last 8 games, where the Bucs went 6-2 and held some very good teams to some really low scores than it is going to be that we saw the first 8 weeks. Well, that's going to do it. Thanks so much for downloading and listening to episode 2 of the Training Camp Journals with Ren. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Ren Daxt. That's capital REN_DAXT. I also tweet out pictures and videos from the practices, so you can sort of follow along with me, almost as live, if you will, with the practice. I'm the fan in the stands for you. Also, the show is produced under the Pewtercast banner of podcasts. So be sure to follow at the Pewtercast. That way you can get the information right when all our podcasts drops. Not only this one, which should be dropping in probably an hour once I send it off to Brent, who was nice enough to produce the show for us and for you guys. So any of those shows, right when they drop, Brent always tweets out, and always under the at the Pewtercast Twitter handle. And so that's going to be it. Back at it tomorrow. Like I said, it'll be a Sunday. I expect the crowd to be just like it was today, a lot bigger. Hoping for cooler weather. It was funny. I always hear, anytime someone talks about being at training camps of like a radio personality or a beat writer or something, they always talk about the weather, and I'd always run through my mind like, you get to watch football for a living and getting paid for it. But once you're there, it's something that you just feel like you have to say. It's weird, and I get it. It's like, I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast, all over the United States, and you're like, Ren, shut up. You get to go, not only you get to go one training, you get to go all of them. Don't complain about the weather. I'm not trying to say that I'm complaining about the weather, but it's sometimes it's uncomfortable. So I'm hoping for a little cooler day tomorrow. I'll be out there, and I'll come home, put my notes together, and we'll get it out for you. So thanks for listening, and until then, go Bucs.